Hey everyone, welcome back to Harry Potter Folklore. So for today's video, we're going to talk about a certain dark wizard who built Azkaban and could in turn be responsible for the actual creation of the Dementors, and I will explain how he may have done it a little later in the video. I'm not going to see you guys waiting till halfway into the video to tell you who it is. The majority of you already may know who I'm talking about. It is of course a man named Azkaban. He was like the Grindelwald before the Voldemort. Actually, if I'm honest, the only thing the three had in common was the fact that they were all dark wizards, because when you think of a comparison between just Voldemort and Grindelwald, well, they didn't really have that much in common, as they viewed the world differently in comparison to their approach to dominating it. Azkaban wasn't really anything like them. He was more of a loner, if I'm honest. Azkaban lived in the 15th century, guys, so this was a time when magic was still in a very early experimental stage in terms of, say, spells being created. Tensions were really high between wizards and muggles, with magical people still being viewed as something satanical. If you could do anything out of the ordinary without a logical explanation, then people tend not to react well. Only the known was safe. Then we have Azkaban, who we know wasn't exactly a normal wizard. He had a cruel and almost unhinged personality. He embraces being a wizard and becomes quite powerful and knowledgeable, especially in relation to the dark arts. However, as I mentioned moments ago, magic was in a rather underdeveloped stage with so much more to come. Don't mistake me here, guys, I'm not saying people hardly knew how to use wands or anything, but comparing it to today's level of magic, you'll find a considerable difference. Azkaban had a deep desire to learn more, to discover more, even if the methods he used became unethical and even contradicting the boundaries of magic. Knowing that the level of practice could land him in trouble with the law, the Dark Wizard decides to leave his town and travel to a more remote location in order to continue his experiments. The reason he wanted to do this? Well, the Dark Wizard felt it was time to move on to human experimentation, when he realizes that there isn't really anywhere he can go without drawing attention to himself. So Azkaban decides to build his own fortress, not on land but the sea. By erecting his fortress in the middle of the harsh and punishing North Sea, he could work alone in solitude without any unwanted interference. How would he get his victims to experiment on? Passing ships, of course. Azkaban could be cloaked from Muggle and even Wizarding vision, so it was as if it wasn't even there, should Azkaban wanted to be that way. He'd remove the cloaking spell, lure the ship to the small island under false pretenses, then capture its crew, which shouldn't be too difficult for a wizard of his experience. At first, the Dark Wizard would experiment on these sailors in an attempt to achieve some wild feat of magic that had never before been done, and when his host would die, most likely from the torture they endured, Azkaban would then dispose of their bodies and move on to the next victim. Now, I'm not exactly sure what the rate of passing ships would be, but given that Azkaban is located in the North Sea, that's a pretty busy shipping route, so I would say he had his fair share of victims. Azkaban's mind slowly began to unravel. That's what I'd like to say. The truth is that it unraveled pretty quickly, given the state it was in for him to even want to experiment on unwilling people. His dark experiments soon turned to pure torture. He became obsessed with inflicting as much pain, torture and misery as physically possible, all while keeping his victims alive for as long as possible, and, let's be honest, with the aid of magic, he could heal wounds or make adjustments that a Muggle would not be able to do. Azkaban joyed in creating misery inside his establishment. The more misery, the better. He took an immense level of satisfaction seeing these poor sailors wallow in pain, knowing they'll never get out alive. His victim count is unknown, but it's assumed to be in the dozens. Azkaban soon became a place of complete and total misery. The screams of victims were sealed within the walls, their blood stained the stone floors, their last moments etched in the memory of the man who caused it. With the atmosphere inside the fortress now so bleak, so cold and unbearably chilling, in addition to Azkaban's own adjustments, a new creature never before seen began to slowly emerge from the depths of despair created inside the Azkaban walls. A creature who was directly inserted among the foulest creatures that walk the earth. Born from the darkest, filthiest places, They glory in decay and misery. They drain peace, hope and happiness out of the air around them. They target every good feeling, every happy memory and suck it out of you. This creature was known as the Dementor. The Dementor's kiss is the creature's most powerful weapon. In order to perform the kiss, a single Dementor removes its hood, forcibly clamp its jaw around the victim's mouth, and consume their soul. The victim is subsequently left in a vegetative state and are unable to move on to the afterlife or become a ghost without their soul. The fate of sucked souls in question was left in the viewer's and reader's interpretation, though it's plausible that when a Dementor dies, every single one of the souls it consumed eventually are freed and pass on, subsequently then allowing the remaining shell of a human to actually die. The creatures are also very intelligent, can take instruction and don't look too far off being able to communicate. The best way to get a Dementor's allegiance is with the guarantee of victims to feed on. It is my guess that this is why Acristus isolated himself in his fortress for so long, for so many years. He tortured the dozens, if not hundreds of victims in an attempt to create an atmosphere so bleak and dreary that the Dementors began to manifest. This was his intention all along. This is why he dedicated so much of his time, so much of his life to torturing so many people. Dementors can't just appear out of thin air, guys. Their environment, it has to be created alongside what I'd assume to be an additional magical input from Acristus. The creation of the Dementor was always intentional. It makes perfect sense to me. The Dark Wizard ensured he created enough Dementors for the creatures to then be able to create the appropriate atmosphere themselves in order to continue to reproduce, which is why I believe they all stay together in like a horde, unless required by the ministry to go on missions. We don't even know what happened to Acristus, guys. No information was recorded in relation to his death. I can only assume, however, that he succumbed to the Dementors that he created, as he was the only human there, and obviously the creatures need to feed. They feel a hunger which would only grow stronger in time. The other possibility, however, is that after creating the creatures and realizing that they did indeed need to feed, that's a rhyme, the Dark Wizard continued to capture even more sailors passing through in order to keep his creatures satisfied. After the death of Acristus, the concealment charms he placed on Azkaban began to lift, slowly revealing the huge island fortress to the wizarding officials, who quickly realized how beneficial the building could be and also how important it was for it not to fall into the wrong hands. I believe what happened in the early infancy of Azkaban adds to why the whole place has such a dark feel to it. So much pain, so much torture occurred within the walls, in addition to the Dementors being the result of such horrific scenes taking place. Well, it's no surprise that the prison is such a feared place. Dementors were feared so greatly by the wizarding governing officials of the time that they refrained from destroying the fortress in fear of the next location that the Dementors would flock to. Therefore, they established an agreement with the creatures that then seen them able to remain in Azkaban and guard the incoming prisoners in exchange for being able to feed off their happy and positive energy, but not their souls. That was saved for the ultimate punishment for criminals with no reprieve. The Dementor who got to suck out their soul would have been a pretty satisfied individual. So guys, that is my take on Acristus, his origins, and how I believe he created the Dementors. If any of you have any additional input, then please feel free to leave it in the comment section below. I will be delighted to read it. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure to look out for the next video, and I will see you all very soon.